I put my foot down with my wife's 22-year-old niece's boyfriend, total meltdown. I posted this under a throwaway to keep things anonymous, but here's what happened. I live in California, and my wife's niece, now 21 and someone I've known since she was 4, asked if she could stay with us for a few weeks. Her father walked out on their family when she was 9, so her mother has always been extra protective and kept her pretty sheltered growing up. I told my wife I didn't mind hosting her niece, especially since her 6-year-old son absolutely adores his cousin and couldn't wait to see her again. Then out of the blue, my wife mentioned she wanted her niece's new boyfriend to join them. He's 46, which really threw me for a loop. I'm 42 and my wife is 43, and my immediate reaction was, wait, what? But she reassured me it would be fine. After about a week of discussion, I finally agreed on one firm condition: if he was going to stay under our roof, I would get to fire off a few pointed questions. My wife asked what I planned to ask, so I outlined 5 key topics. What's your endgame? Serious relationship, marriage, or kids? Have you discussed what would happen if she got pregnant? Because nobody else in the family seemed willing to bring these things up. Her mother seemed perfectly okay with the age gap, which honestly left me baffled. When niece and her boyfriend arrived, I stayed polite at dinner, then later invited him out on the porch for a beer, just the two of us. I began my line of questioning, and by the second question, he'd already gone on the defensive, insisting it wasn't any of my business. That really rubbed me the wrong way, so I reminded him he was our guest for a week and that I had every right to ask a few questions since this was my niece's well-being on the line. He accused me of making him uncomfortable, and I shot back that I was the one feeling uneasy about a middle-aged man moving into my house to sleep under the same roof as a young adult. I gave him a simple ultimatum: answer honestly like a stand-up guy, or feel free to hit the road, and sure enough, he chose the road. My wife and niece were furious, calling me a jerk and insisting I drop the whole thing. Again, I was told it was none of my business. They've since broken up, which part of me feels relieved about, but now I'm left questioning whether I was totally in the right or if I crossed a line trying to protect my family. When you're the only one saying what everyone's thinking, yeah, it's gonna get loud. Sometimes, parenting isn't about compromise, it's about sticking to what you know is fair. Even if it sizzles. Now, from relationship red flags to family food wars, when bacon's the breaking point, dinner just got awkward. I refused to quit bacon for my vegan team. You won't believe her reaction. I live out in the rural Midwest, where sizzling bacon at sunrise is nothing short of tradition, so when my 15-year-old daughter announced she was going fully vegan this year, I jumped right in with her plan, eager to learn new recipes and swap in alternative ingredients. I even reworked our grocery budget to cover pricier plant-based substitutes, and at first, everything went smoothly until one morning. I cooked up a batch of bacon, rinsed the pan, and loaded it into the dishwasher like usual. That's when she completely lost it, insisting that was her dedicated vegan pan and accusing me of contaminating our dishes with animal grease. Typical teenage drama, but still, it caught me off guard. I tried to explain that the skillet was a family heirloom older than her and not exclusively hers, but she doubled down, demanding I buy her a brand new pan solely for vegan cooking. Not wanting to make her feel unwelcome at the breakfast table, I agreed and ordered her a set of bright, color-coded pans so I'd remember to steer clear of them unless I was whipping up tofu scrambles. Even that gesture wasn't enough, though. Next, she claimed the dishwasher and refrigerator were contaminated by my bacon grease, insisting neither she nor her mom should ever eat meat under our roof again. I wash my hands after breakfast, of course, but apparently that tiny bit of residual grease traumatizes her, and frankly, I wasn't about to surrender my Saturday morning ritual. My wife took a more moderate stance, suggesting we could still enjoy meat when visiting relatives nearby, so our daughter wouldn't feel ostracized in the family kitchen. Our teen insisted that cheese and butter were fine, but any trace of meat made her physically ill, a dilemma that left me torn between supporting her values and preserving my own breakfast traditions. In my book, she needs to learn some kitchen coexistence. I'm not giving up bacon on principle. One commenter, Doffy Trash, nailed it: not the bad, just get her a separate sponge so she can wash her own pans without fear of cross-contamination. I figure once she's the one scrubbing her special dishes, the attitude will shift pretty quickly. After all, responsibility has a way of cooling down teenage theatrics. Sometimes, parenting isn't about compromise, it's about sticking to what you know is fair. Even if it sizzles. Next, we step into a therapy room where the blame gets flipped fast and one dad walks out for all the right reasons. I stormed out of my son's therapy session. His therapist actually blamed me. 4 years ago, at age 37, I finally admitted to myself and everyone else that I'm gay. That moment, man, it felt like the toughest mountain I'd ever climbed, and even now I'm amazed at how I found the courage to do it. At first, folks in my town, my so-called friends, and even some family members turned on me, but over time I learned to embrace who I am without feeling guilty. Before I came out, I was living a totally different life. I'd been married to a woman, and together we had 2 amazing kids. Of course, once I was honest about my sexuality, that marriage ended, but it also freed me to live more authentically. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I got the call that my son had been expelled for scrawling vile slurs. When I heard what Lucas had done, I felt a gut punch of shame and anger, because I never imagined he'd lash out like that. So I sat him down to talk it through, only to hear him snap that he wouldn't have treated someone that way if I'd been a bad dad. That was a turning point. I realized I couldn't handle his attitude alone, so I scheduled a therapy session to get him the help he needed. But at that appointment, instead of calling out his hatred, the therapist let Lucas blame me, saying I'd poisoned his view of being gay by fracturing the family when I left his father. I'd brought him there hoping to break through Lucas's hate, not to have my identity used as a scapegoat, and it felt like a total betrayal of why we were in that chair. After watching them sit there, calmly dissecting my outness as the root of my son's homophobia, I couldn't stay, and I walked right out of the office. I'm sick of hearing that my sexuality somehow excuses hateful behavior in the people I love. I went through depression and isolation, and I refuse to do it again by shouldering blame that isn't mine. I love Lucas more than anything, but I refuse to sit quietly while someone tells him it's acceptable to hate me just because I'm gay. My ex slammed me with a furious text, claiming I was sabotaging our son's progress, but honestly, I think the real sabotage was letting that therapist validate bigotry under the guise of family therapy. So Reddit, tell me, did I overreact by leaving, or was I right to stand up for myself instead of being made the villain in my own child's healing process? There's only so much guilt one person can carry, especially when it's misplaced. Now picture being forced into full-time care duty for someone else's kid while no one steps up to help. Yeah, this one's heavy. They made me my sister's 24/7 caretaker. Am I the bad? I know that clickbait title sounds brutal, but please hear me out before you judge. My sister is severely autistic and basically needs someone watching her every second. She can't be left alone at all. She's nonverbal and totally dependent, so there's no way she can look after herself. At just 12 years old, she's so destructive and aggressive that she tears through anything she touches. I hate admitting this, but I genuinely resent her. Calling it hatred feels awful, yet the frustration is impossible to ignore. I was only 6 when she was born, and from that day on, my parents' full attention shifted entirely to her. By the time I was 7, they'd moved me into the basement so she could have my old bedroom next to theirs. Every toy I owned was wrecked by her, and whenever I complained, my parents brushed me off. When I turned 14 and she destroyed the MacBook my school provided, somehow I was the one at fault. On top of everything else, I'm expected to drop whatever I'm doing to look after her whenever my parents need a break. That means I can't make solid plans with friends. If they call for help, I have to bail immediately or face punishment. Case in point, I went to see the new Spider-Man movie and turned my phone off in the theater, and I got grounded for it. It feels like I'm nothing more than a designated caretaker, and anything in my life takes a backseat to her needs. Just last week, I was chosen to give a speech at a school event. I was thrilled, but my parents promised they'd be there and then bailed because of her. They've repeatedly sidelined my achievements, always using my sister as the excuse. All that resentment built up inside me until today, when it finally spilled out. While we were talking about college, Dad joked that I should pick a high-paying major so I can support my sister after they're gone. I don't know why, but that offhand comment shattered me. I broke down crying and screaming about how it's always about her. I told them I feel like their full-time caregiver, destined to be my sister's bad forever, and then I locked myself in my room. Since then, they haven't even checked on me, and I'm left here wrestling with guilt, anger, and the question, am I the bad? Being responsible doesn't mean being taken for granted. Sometimes, you've got to walk away, even from family. Now we shift from family pressure to friendship betrayal. When your bestie crashes a car and wants you to take the blame, what would you do? I refused to take the fall for my friend's unlicensed car crash. Now she's threatening me. I've been picking at this mess for weeks, and it still drives me nuts. A couple of weeks ago, my friend Dia asked if I'd tag along on an errand so I could see her brand new car. Perfect timing since mine was in the shop for maintenance. We were chatting away when she swung left at an intersection and clipped another driver's bumper. We both jumped at the impact, shaken but thankfully okay. As I reached for my phone to call the cops, Dia panicked and begged me to handle things without involving the police. I felt uneasy agreeing to that, so I dialed in anyway. That's when she desperately pleaded for me to hop into the driver's seat and claim I was behind the wheel. I was stunned. Turns out she'd never bothered to get a license, even though her mom had bought her the car. I wasn't comfortable lying to law enforcement, so I stuck to my guns. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and waited for the officers to arrive. Sure enough, Dia was arrested on the spot for driving without a license, insurance, or registration. Today she told me the police blamed her for the whole accident. Now Dia, her mom, and half her friends are calling me privileged and bad, insisting I should have just swapped seats to save her from fines, possible jail time, and even getting kicked out of our graduate program. I tried explaining that taking the blame would have made me legally responsible for all the damages, insurance hikes, and potential fraud charges if the other driver had seen us switch. But they won't hear it, and they're still mad at me. So here I am, wondering if I really was in the wrong for refusing to lie. I drove them to the scene. I didn't cause the crash, and I didn't have a license to begin with. I just wouldn't let my friend ruin my life to cover hers. Some friendships are ride or die, but some stop at the crash site. Next up, a simple question asked in the wrong moment takes down years of confidence in seconds. This one hits hard. I ruined my friend's confidence with one question. You won't believe the fallout. Was I acting foolish by asking my friend why he'd packed on so much weight over the years? I'm a 23-year-old guy who just moved to a new city and instantly clicked with a fun crew I met at the local gym. We spend loads of time together, hitting workouts, grabbing dinner, or just hanging out, and they've been awesome about showing me the ropes. There's one guy, Mark, who's basically the life of every gathering with his upbeat vibe and how much everyone adores him. Most of the group stay pretty fit, but Mark stands out as noticeably heavier and doesn't hit the gym much, which never really registered with me until now. One evening, a friend pulled out old snapshots from our past trips, and I was stunned by how ripped Mark looked back then. I honestly almost didn't recognize him without the extra weight, so I blurted out something like, "Hey man, what happened to your old physique?" I meant it as casual curiosity, not a dig at his appearance, but I can see now how it came across. The room went completely silent, and I felt like every eye was stabbing me with its glare. One of the girls flat out told me my comment was way out of line, accused me of having zero tact, and demanded I leave. Feeling blindsided, I tried to explain I genuinely just wanted to understand his transformation and didn't mean to offend. Mark, ever the gentleman, quietly said it was okay and asked everyone to calm down, though I could tell he was uncomfortable. Later, someone pulled me aside to say I should really think before I speak, warning that blunt honesty can hurt more than help. Since that night, the group's vibe has felt off, and I can't tell if they're still upset with me over one careless question. Part of me thought our prank-friendly dynamic meant everything was fair game, but I'm starting to realize some lines shouldn't be crossed. So here I am, debating whether I was just clueless or if I truly crossed the line by asking about his weight. It's wild how fast words can damage trust, especially when they come from someone close. Now let's lighten it up with a sibling prank that backfired so badly, even TikTok would say too far. I pranked my younger sister on Tinder and it blew up in my face. I'll never forget the night I discovered my sister, who's only 16, had a Tinder notification pop up on her phone right after mine died and I was borrowing it to call a friend. When she snatched her phone back and snapped, "None of your business," I figured I'd play detective before tattling to our parents. I reached out to my college buddy Kevin, who just happens to be a male model, and he laughed when I asked if I could borrow his photos for a harmless experiment. I whipped up a new Tinder profile, set the age to 22 and the radius to a mile, and within minutes I spotted her account. She'd even fudged her age to 19. I super liked her and, sure enough, she matched me. I suggested a fancy Sunday lunch downtown, then mentioned we could hang at my place afterward. She didn't hesitate. She told mom and dad she was off with a track buddy for the night. After she left, I hauled our parents into the living room, laid out my phone, and showed them every message. Fuming, my dad agreed we should all confront her at the restaurant. So the two of us strolled in to find her sitting solo, dressed up and waiting for Jim. When Dad announced there was no Jim, she burst into tears and demanded we leave. I told her it was unbelievably reckless for a high schooler to be planning to meet a stranger, especially one she'd never seen in person, at a grown-up hangout. My dad ranted about internet dangers, I added my 2 cents about honesty, and she bolted out the door in tears. That evening I bragged about the stunt in a group chat and got mixed reactions. Half my friends thought it was hilarious, while 2 of my female friends called me cruel. Now I'm torn. Did I teach her a vital lesson about online safety, or did I take things way too far? Let me know what you think. Sometimes pranks don't end in laughs, they end in family group chats and major regrets. Next, we step into the garden, where one neighbor thought the tomatoes were free. She was very wrong. I caught my neighbor stealing my veggies. You won't believe what happened. I'm a 30-year-old guy living in a cozy little neighborhood where folks pretty much know each other by name. Not long ago, I faced a situation where I stopped a woman from helping herself to my greenhouse produce and even called the cops when she refused to drop the haul. My street is laid back, with everyone tending their own patch of yard or garden. Most houses have flower beds or vegetable plots, and it's all very peaceful. Behind a 4-foot picket fence in my backyard sits a modest greenhouse that you can easily spot from the road. We recently got new neighbors, but I hadn't crossed paths with them until this afternoon. My motion sensor camera pinged me about movement near the greenhouse, so I went out to investigate and found a woman and a teenager filling a bag with my tomatoes and peppers. I raised my voice and asked what on earth they were doing, and she waved it off, claiming she was friends with the owner. I told her to run that by me one more time, since I'm the actual owner and I had never met them before. Realizing she'd been caught red-handed, she tried to make off with the bag of veggies. I put my foot down and gave her 2 minutes to dump the produce and get off my property, or I'd press charges. She started bawling about feeding her kid and how she couldn't afford a criminal record, but I wasn't about to reward someone for stealing. So I grabbed the bag back, dialed the police, and waited for them to arrive. Ever since, she's been telling everyone I'm the bad guy and toxic, but most of my neighbors agree she was in the wrong, even though some of her Facebook friends insist I should be ashamed. When she was offered a chance to walk away without involving law enforcement, she flipped out, screaming at me and smashing a pot of chives in the process. In all honesty, if she had simply asked, I would have gladly handed over a few peppers, tomatoes, or even some squash, but she never gave me that courtesy. Boundaries matter even if you're just talking about zucchini. But this next story? It's no joke. A daycare refuses sunscreen because of skin color. Let that sink in. They refuse sunscreen for my daughter because of her skin color? I left a pretty scathing Yelp review accusing my daughter's daycare of outright racism. It all began when my 6-year-old came home upset because the teachers refused to apply sunscreen on her. When she asked for a little SPF, they told her that black kids don't need sunscreen when in fact everyone does. On a field trip before COVID hit, the staff lined up all the black children in the blazing sun while the white kids lounged comfortably in the shade, insisting lighter skin was more delicate, a ridiculous excuse if I ever heard one. I spoke with the daycare manager, and she defended the policy, though she did admit they'd bend the rule if we produced a doctor's note. So I had my daughter bring in a note from her pediatrician and even let her share the extra sunscreen with classmates, but the teacher promptly confiscated it, saying she needed explicit permission to let any child use it. A few days later she came home with a nasty sunburn and peeling skin, and that was the last straw. I blasted them in my review. I called them racist, pointed out they were segregating kids, and warned that forcing children into the sun without sunscreen could lead to skin cancer. I sent the director scientific articles proving that black skin can and does burn, along with the names of the staff enforcing this dangerous policy. She replied that everyone was just following her orders, insisted black children have more natural protection, accused me of overreacting, and demanded I take my review down. Now I'm seriously considering contacting a local news outlet. A friend even called me a Karen for airing this publicly and reminded me that melanin offers extra protection, as if that excuse is leaving any child unprotected in the sun. When the people you trust make your kid unsafe, there's no staying quiet. And finally, imagine checking your phone and finding out you've been a dad for 18 years. This one's unreal. You won't believe I just found out I'm dad to a 18-year-old daughter. I've been holding onto a text message I stumbled across 5 years ago when I was 13. Back then I grabbed my dad's phone and snooped, and I still can't shake what I saw. At the time, my stepmom was a few months pregnant, and I saw a message from my dad that said, "Alice is being awful again, thank God I'm having a baby with someone I actually love." Her reply read, "I can't wait to have a child without her terrible genes mixed in," and my heart sank when I realized they were talking about me. Hurt and betrayed, I screenshotted those messages and sent them straight to my mom, knowing full well I'd overstepped, but I felt I had to defend myself. Ever since that day, I refused to stay at my dad's house. When custody went to court, I told the judge I couldn't live with him under any circumstances. Both my dad and stepmom apologized over and over, he even cried in front of me, but I still can't bring myself to forgive them for the way they spoke about their own child. I know I shouldn't have read someone else's texts, and part of me regrets snooping, but those words are burned into my memory and I can't unsee them. Am I in the wrong for keeping a hold of those messages and letting them shape my relationship with my dad? I don't think so. The way they tore me down just to insult each other crossed a line. Parents shouldn't trash their kids like that. Sure, I made a mistake by invading their privacy, but their cruelty toward me was so deep that I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. I'm still working through whether I'll ever let them back into my life, but for now I'm standing by my choice to protect myself.